Hi friends, this is Justin here. I want to be able to share with you today's encouraging word. We are going to be going through the book of John chapter 18, verse 25 to 40. We are closing out chapter 18 and we have lots of things going on. Jesus is on trial. At last he was with a high priest, but he was not with the chief priest. They were sending him to the chief priest. Now in John's gospel, he doesn't really go into the trial that happened with the chief priest. The other gospels do talk about that part of the story much more than John's gospel. And what's kind of interesting when you read all the gospel stories, the other gospel stories kind of go briefly over the story of Pilate, whereas John's gospel goes over a lot with Pilate. Matter of fact, we're not even going to finish Pilate today. We got a lot of verses to cover today, a lot of story to cover today, and a lot of things to be able to meditate on and think about. But that is kind of one of the realities over there. I'm doing this from home, and my dog sounds like a reindeer clippity-cloppeting through the house. So there we go. She's freaking out. John chapter 18, verse 25 and following. It says this, in verse 25, "Now Simon Peter was standing and warming himself. So they said to them, 'You also are not one of his disciples, are you?' And he denied it, and he said, 'I am not.' And one of the servants of the high priest, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off, asked, 'Did I not see you at the garden with him?' Peter again denied it, and at once the rooster crowed." Now, this is a tragic story. My sixth sense of humor finds it odd that the one guy that Peter stabs, like his relative, is able to see him later on. He's like, "Man, you look familiar." And he was there. Like, it's not that, he was there with the arresting party and all these other various things. And Peter is able to be kind of sussed out by everyone. Everyone sniffs him out, and they say, "Aren't you the one?" Earlier he had one other denial. This is denial 2 and 3, and we see that this is the third denial that Jesus predicted and that the Old Testament predicted, and that Peter is able to look at and talk, be able to recognize. Now, once again, in John's gospel, or John's description of the events over here, he doesn't spend as much time talking about the hardships or the sadness that Peter has. He's just kind of keeping things at a level of really putting the focus on Jesus. But he does mention it here, and he kind of moves back over to the story of Jesus. It says, "Then they led Jesus from the house of Caiaphas." So all night long, Jesus has been under trial at Caiaphas's place. And Caiaphas is the chief priest, the number one priest of the whole region. And he and the other religious leaders that were meeting all night long with Jesus, they have decided to send Jesus to Pilate. And so at this point, after Peter has denied Jesus the third time, the rooster crows because it's early in the morning. And at the same time, Jesus is being led out and being prepared to be able to be sent over to, it says, it was the governor's house, and it was early in the morning. And they themselves did not enter the governor's headquarters, so they would not be defiled and will be able to eat the Passover. I'm going to stop right over there for verse 28, because there's a lot of things going on in verse 28. In verse 28, it tells us that it is the season of Passover, and Passover is a long time where people celebrate, but there is one specific day where everyone gathers together and they have a Passover meal together. It's on Passover. They have a Seder meal, and there's other things part of the celebration. And if you remember, Jesus, for the Last Supper, he has that meal with his disciples beforehand. He has that Seder meal with his disciples early and beforehand, because he knows that he's not going to be able to have that meal with them during this time. And John wants to show us that Jesus is the Passover lamb for each and every one of us. And so the religious leaders, they can't go into the government building, because if they go into the government building, they're going to get defiled. They're around, pagan people and all this other stuff. They become unclean. And if they become unclean, they can't have dinner later on. I mean, there's not enough time for them later on to be able to do this. And so what's interesting is, they go to Pilate's place early in the morning. And, Pilate knows, Passover is like the biggest holiday in Jerusalem. They're in Jerusalem. So Pilate knows it's the biggest holiday for everybody over here. The city is bustling. There's bazillions of people that have come in town just for Passover. There's celebrations. There's also all the unrest of other various things going on. And now the chief priests and the religious leaders, they come over to the door of Pilate and they have a request. And their request is that the government would kill someone. And Pilate here, he shows a little bit of respect. He comes out and, he doesn't, as, government officials, I mean, can you imagine if this was America or whatever, an American judge would say, no, you come to me. Actually Pilate comes out and meets them outside and says, okay, fine. What is it that you have for them? And what we're going to see here is there's going to be a situation where Pilate's going to go outside and talk to the Jewish people and the leaders and everything. And sometimes he's going to bring Jesus with him when he goes outside. And then sometimes he's going to go inside and he's going to talk to Jesus alone. And it's just him and Jesus and just kind of, the court guards or whoever is in there. But, like the religious leaders, they're not part of that conversation. And so there's going to be he goes outside and talks to people. He comes inside and talks to Jesus and just Jesus alone. Then goes outside and talks to people and comes back inside. And we're going to see this kind of bouncing back and forth of what goes on over here for this story. And so Pilate comes out and he sees the chief priests in regards to the various situation. And the chief priests, they can't go any further because they want to maintain their cleanliness before God to be able to celebrate their holiday and such. Verse 29, so Pilate went outside to them and said, what accusations do you bring against this man? Now, that's an important question. What is your accusation you have? I mean, you're going to be asking death for the person. There needs to be a really good reason why we are doing this. And verse 30, they answered him, if this man were not doing evil, we would not have delivered him over to you. And Pilate said to them, take him yourselves and judge him by your own law. Now, this is where, they're like, he's doing some sort of evil and we, and Pilate's like, listen, I'm not going to get into, people doing evil. We don't just, as in America today, we don't arrest people if they're just vaguely evil. You have to actually commit a crime. And Jesus has not committed a crime here and in that situation. And they said, continuing on, middle of verse 31, and the Jews said to him, it is not lawful for us to put anyone to death. This was to fulfill the word that Jesus had spoken to show by what kind of death he was going to die. So Jesus, they're like, hey, we can't put anyone to death, at least anyone to death on a cross. If you fast forward over into other parts of the Bible, think of Acts chapter 7. In Acts chapter 7, Stephen, not a disciple, but Stephen, a deacon, is standing up before a bunch of people and he's talking about Jesus and he's telling them about various things. And the crowd gets angry, they drag him out, and with stones, they take the stones and they pound him in and they kill him that way. There were times when Jesus was preaching, we've seen in the book of John where Jesus is preaching and he got people angry. They wanted to drag him away, take stones and to beat him. That is kind of like a mob rule, and that is a way that the Jews could have approached in killing Jesus, where you rile up a mob, grab the person, throw them outside, and then you pulverize a person. But Jesus wasn't supposed to die that way. Jesus was supposed to die in a different way, and that's one of those things that sometimes people will say on this, hey, the Jews didn't have the authority to kill people. Well, they didn't have the authority to put people on crosses. They didn't have that authority. They did have authority to be able to do some other things, though. And so, it's just kind of a different world and just kind of something to be able to acknowledge and to be able to recognize. Because they said at the very end, when they spoke this, that they're showing that Jesus is going to die by a different death. He wasn't just going to be grabbed. It was going to be mob justice or mob vigilantism of something of that nature. But rather, they wanted something a bit more official. And they wanted something to be, they wanted something that was going to be public and to be able to take it. that way. Now we're getting to the part of the story where I think is the most important part of this whole story for us to be able to read and understand, starting in verse 33. So Pilate entered his headquarters again, and he called Jesus and said to him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" So now we're inside, and it's just Pilate and Jesus over here. And Jesus answered him, Do you say this on your own accord, or did others say it to you about me?" So Jesus, his response, they say, "Hey, are you the king of the Jews?" And he's like, "Well, do you believe that, or is that something that other people are saying about me?" And Pilate's probably thinking, I don't know who you are. Pilate might have not known who Jesus was at that time. And Pilate answered, "Am I a Jew?" And, Pilate's trying to say, I'm not a Jewish person, and I don't understand what this argument is in regards about. He says, "Your own nation and chief priests have delivered you over to me. What have you done?" And here comes the key verse, I think, for this whole passage. And that is over here in verse 36. Verse 36, Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting that I might not be delivered over to the Jews. But my kingdom is not from the world." Jesus firmly states that he is not here for the politics of this world. He's not here for the power plays of this world. He's not here for the big mind games and all this gunk that goes on around us in this world. Humanity thinks of new ways constantly to stir the pot when it comes to money, power, sex, greed, all that stuff. The world operates in various ways, and ever since the very beginning, when we built a tower in Babel to go over and be gods and all this other stuff, humanity has always strived to be able to build and work on various things, sometimes together to be able to build great things, but sometimes to stab each other in the back and be able to get more power for ourselves and all that other nonsense. There are games upon games upon games, and corruption upon corruption upon corruption in the Roman government that we could be able to point to, and also in the Jewish government at the time when it was under Roman rule. We could look at that stuff in our world today over here, and Jesus says, "My kingdom is not about that stuff." Because if my kingdom was about that stuff, I would be fighting and using the same tactics that you guys would be doing. I'd be trying to bribe people. I would be trying to raise up a physical army and marching and do various things. I'd be trying to do the things, because if Jesus' kingdom is the same as Pilate's kingdom, then Jesus' kingdom is going to be destroyed and wiped away. Jesus is building God's kingdom. And God's kingdom can't be wiped away, and it can't be destroyed. And because we're of God's kingdom, we can't use the earthly kingdom's methods to advance God's kingdom. We can't use the earthly kingdom's means and abilities to be able to move God's kingdom forward and to be able to do things for God's kingdom. If those things would help it, then maybe we would do it. I don't know. But God's kingdom is a different kingdom. We're a kingdom that we're humble before one another. We recognize that we're called to love our enemies. We pray for those who persecute us. And we genuinely seek to love and care for others in ways that are significant and meaningful. We want to be able to let people know about the good news of Jesus Christ. And we want people to have hope. We want people to have hope. Not that this earthly kingdom is going to be lasting forever, but that there is a better kingdom, and there's a greater kingdom, and there's a better way. And Jesus lets Pilate know that his kingdom is different. And I just love that, and I think that is important for us to be able to know and understand over here. Jesus says this over to Pilate. When Pilate hears this, it says, "Then Pilate said to him, 'So are you a king?' And Jesus answered him, 'You say that I am a king. For this purpose I was born, and for this purpose I have come into the world, to bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice. Pilate says to him, what is truth? Now, we have an interesting situation over here. Pilate and Jesus are having, once again, this private conversation. And they're talking about all these various things. And Pilate's like, well, are you a king? Because, everyone's saying that he's the king of the Jews. That's one of the things they're going to put on the cross above him. That is a political statement. Pilate's able to get his mind around that political statement. And that's this worldly kingdom stuff. That's sedition. That's rebellion. That's revolution. Pilate can put someone to death for that type of stuff. But Jesus is saying that I'm not in regards to for those various things. And he says, when Pilate says, are you a king? Jesus is being elusive. Now, we as Christians would say, yes, he is a king. He's a king of the world. He is the king of the universe. He is the king of our hearts. And we want to be able to declare that Jesus is a king, that he is sovereign. He is in control. But Pilate is not looking for that type of king. He's looking for a political king and various things and such. And so Jesus says, listen, I've come, this is the reason why I came. I came to be able to face this, and I came to be able to bear truth. And Pilate's like, well, what is truth? And that truth is standing in front of him right over there in regards to what he's got going on over there. Second half of verse 38, and as he said this, and he had said this, he went back outside to the Jews and told them, I find no guilt in him. But you have accustomed that I should release one man for you at the Passover. So do you want me to release to you the king of the Jews? And they cried out, not this man, but Barabbas. Now Barabbas was a robber. And with that, we're going to be able to end our time over here. That Pilate gives them one last out to be able to get out of this situation. Pilate is showing that he is reluctant to be able to do what just the religious leaders are wanting to be able to have done over here. And actually, historically speaking, this reluctance is very surprising. Pilate was not reluctant to do much harsher things to other various people historically, but here Scripture shows him in a reluctant position. But the reason why he's reluctant over here is because Pilate doesn't understand what Jesus means when he says that he is a different type of king, that he has a different type of kingdom, and that he comes to speak a truth, a different type of truth that Pilate has ever known. And when we see Jesus, we see our king, we see his kingdom, and we see the one who's told us the truth. That is what we can be able to know and trust for this time together. Thanks very much for joining us today. I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.